And we're live. Hello, ladies. I'm so excited that you are here with us. Couple of housekeeping things. Go ahead and put your questions and comments in the feed, just like you did yesterday. We do have Kim monitoring them, so she'll be sharing them, and Bethany will be able to answer your questions. So Bethany is here with us from California, from Dan McCollum's church, Mission Church, correct?
Yes. Yeah. I'm part of the Mission Church in Vacaville, California.
Yeah. So we're so excited. And so Julie, you have the all of the knowledge of how amazing Bethany is. So why don't you share, in being our prophetic director, who Bethany is, how amazing she is, why you wanted to bring her on, and all that kind of good stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. So Bethany and I, we've never physically met yet. She was highlighted to me, I think it was a couple years ago, and we just started talking when I was working at the Elijah List, and we were just talking about some assignments that she was doing. And it was, I think, in the process when you were ready to write the book, Own Your Assignment, right?
Yeah.
So it's been just kind of fun to follow her journey. And then she just keeps popping up in different places that I'm at. And I'm like, okay, Lord, you're making this really evident that this is supposed to be something that continues on. So I've just kind of stayed behind her and kind of watched what she's doing. And then when the opportunity came up with Higher View, I was like, oh my gosh, Bethany is the one. I need to reach out to her and see if she'd be willing to come and just share with the women. She's a mother, she's a wife, she's a worshiper, she's a prophetic teacher, she's a speaker. She just holds that wisdom and knowledge of the prophetic, and she can share a little bit more about where that comes from. But I really wanted to have a foundation laid in this group as we move forward with the prophetic, because there's just a lot of swirl happening right now. And so I thought, who best but Bethany? So we're honored to have you on, Bethany, and we're excited to see what the Lord's going to do this morning.
Wow, thank you.
Yeah.
I am so honored to be here with all of you guys and officially meeting you all. And what a powerful group. This is so great to be here. Now, just so I know, because I wasn't quite sure, how much time did you want me to share about just some of these prophetic foundations and protocols, just so I honor your guys' time and all the people that are watching?
Yeah, so I have this scheduled until 1:00, so you can, go as long as you want till 1. And really, my agenda, just to, let everybody know and let you know what I'm going to be trying to throw you under the bus on, is, giving the women a taste, and then hopefully down the road we'll be bringing you in for, more regular type training and classes and courses that we can. Yeah, so
that's awesome. Okay, great. Yeah, well, I'm excited to be here. Just a little background from who I am. I am one of the advanced prophetic trainers and also the co-founder of Prophetic Company with Dan McCollum and others here in Vacaville, California. And I'm also the worship director here in Vacaville as well. So I do multiple things, but it's kind of my particular sphere of influence. But I'm just super passionate about people really being activated in the prophetic, because first of all, it's their right as sons and daughters. Mm-hmm. Every son and daughter, it's the dignity of every son and daughter to hear and know the voice of God. And so we are really coming into a time and a place and a season where every person needs to know the voice of God because of what he's about to do on the earth. Mm-hmm. And, there's more people prophesying on the earth today than ever before. I mean, just even the sheer numbers, not just because of, the fact that we have such a large population, but there's just been such an overflow of the prophetic. Do you guys know what I'm talking about? Like,
oh yeah,
there used maybe 20 years ago, even the church I grew up in, we would have the visiting prophets, maybe the occasional elders would stand up and prophesy in the church, but that was about it.
Yeah.
We believed in prophecy, but it really wasn't trained amongst the believers as to the level that it is today. And so I love seeing these prophetic communities build up. And so I wanted to share, they just asked me to share a little bit about our prophetic foundations, as well as our protocols, which I like to call the rules of the game. And so I'm just going to kind of share, first of all, our 3 prophetic foundations of really what makes a distinct, healthy prophetic community. And the first is that a prophetic community is where everyone can prophesy. Everyone can prophesy. You know, it was God's dream for the last days where a prophetic community where everyone could prophesy. In Joel 2:28, it says he poured out his spirit on his sons and daughters so that they could prophesy, that old men would dream dreams, young men would have visions. And so we see that it was actually the heart of the Father to pour out his spirit so that his sons and daughters could know his voice.
Right.
And I kind of like to make this distinction as well, because first of all, prophecy is available to everyone who wants this gift. But I really like to make this distinction because I think this is an important one, that is I'm seeing noticed as I train, is a lot of times people think, well, I don't have the gift of prophecy, you know, or I don't have the gift of, you know, seeing, or I don't have the gift of hearing. That person does. And I'm actually writing this book right now, but I don't know if people realize, but we are hardwired to hear God's voice. Like we are actually created in our DNA, in our physical being, our spirit, and our soul. We are hardwired to hear the voice of God, to see, to feel, and perceive what he is saying. You know, Jesus said, my sheep know my voice. He would never give a requirement for something that we could not step into, that we could not fulfill. And so he said, my sheep know my voice. Well, how is that? It's because we are absolutely hardwired to see God, to hear him, to know him, and to feel his presence. And so when we make the distinction that seeing is not prophecy, okay? Hearing is not prophecy.
Come on. Yeah.
Feeling his presence, that is not prophecy. Okay. I'm gonna clarify what prophecy is, but those are not prophecy. Those are our receptors. Those are the ways we're receiving his voice. Those are the ways we're picking up on his voice. Now, it becomes prophecy when what I'm seeing, what I'm hearing or feeling, I take that and I use that to serve someone else in a gift of love.
That's good.
Okay? That's when it becomes prophecy, because prophecy is a gift, meaning it has to be served to someone else.
Love
okay, so receiving the information, I'm hardwired. Every single person watching right now, you are hardwired to not only know and hear God's voice, but you probably already are. You just didn't know it was him. And so that's one of the things that we love to do in our prophetic trainings, is to kind of flip that light switch on to the ways that you're already hearing or seeing or feeling God, because we are supernaturally natural. You know, it's God's super and it's our natural. So we're hardwired to hear him, but prophecy is just taking what God's speaking to you about someone else and using that to serve them in love.
So
that's when it becomes the gift of prophecy. The other spiritual gifts are the same thing, a word of wisdom. Okay, you're taking what God's given you and you're giving it as a word of wisdom. Okay, word of knowledge, you're taking what God's given you and you serve it someone else as a word of knowledge. So can you see the distinction there between the gifts of the Spirit? It always has to have an outflow. Gifts have an outflow. Okay, it's not what you're receiving, it's what you're doing with what you're receiving when it becomes a gift.
That's good.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I feel like that distinction is really, really important for people, especially because what happens is you'll disqualify yourself from thinking that you don't have that gift, you know? And the reality is we all have access to his voice. Because we know in part, we prophesy in part. So each one of us gets a different view, a different picture of what's God's saying. And then what we do with that information is whether or not it becomes a gift. So because of that, I believe we can all prophesy, because it's what you choose to do with the revelation God's giving you, whether or not you choose to serve someone else in love. All right. So yes, everyone can prophesy. This is why God poured out his Spirit on all flesh. And so, so that's like the first foundation, that everyone can prophesy. You know, God's good thoughts towards us are as numerous as the sands of the seashore. I think it's in Psalm 139, you know, it says his good thoughts, you know, I have toward you, you know, and numerous as the sands of the seashore. And so we kind of laugh about this, but I think my colleague Dano, he kind of decided to Google how many sands there are in the world. I know, only he would think this. And it was like a number I've never even heard of. It was like a quinzillion or something like that. It was crazy. So then he took that number and divided it by 7 billion people. And it was still like billions and billions of grains of sand. So at the very least, God has billions and billions and billions of good thoughts of his good thoughts for every single person you meet. So
Yeah.
when we prophesy, when we meet people, all we're doing is we are just accessing one of those grains of great thoughts that God has for that person. You know, and so that first kind of foundation that everyone can prophesy. The second really foundation for a healthy prophetic community is that the prophetic community judges and acts upon the word. All right. I feel like this is such a game changer. And this is probably one of the reasons why so many people have been wary of the prophetic or maybe have felt abused by the prophetic in the past because they didn't understand this principle that it is actually our responsibility to judge and act upon the word. 1 Corinthians 14:29 says that 2 or 3 prophets should speak and the others should weigh carefully what is said. And so what is that saying? It's not saying, it's just basically saying that it is our responsibility to judge or weigh the words that are being spoken. And we like to say it like this, okay? We like to say it like this, is that the receiver is as powerful as the giver.
That's good.
In a prophetic exchange, the receiver is as powerful as the giver. So, and I actually like to take it one up because I actually like to say, actually, I believe the receiver is actually more powerful than the giver because it is my agreement as the receiver with the word I'm receiving that will allow it to stay in my life or not.
Yeah.
Whether good or bad, right? And so the receiver is as powerful as the giver. What is that? It's like, okay, I'm me as the giver of the prophetic word. I've got the spirit of the living God in me. Okay. He's giving me information for you. And I can take that information and I'm going to speak that over your life as a giver. You as the receiver have the same spirit of the living God living inside of you to receive that word and to judge that word and to discern which parts are true and which maybe need to be put on the shelf or whether or not to judge it. And so there's actually more scriptures in the Bible about judging a prophetic word than there is about delivering a prophetic word. And so when you have a healthy community and you empower the receiver with the reality that they are as powerful, if not more powerful in a prophetic exchange, it first of all, it creates a culture of honor. Right. Because me as the giver is valuing your responsibility as the receiver to judge this word, you know? So I feel like that's very powerful. And it also helps increase like faith and risk. Like, you know, I'm giving a word to someone that is kind of like directional and maybe really strong. I will absolutely come up to them and I will say, you know what? I have this word for you. I really want you to test this word. I trust that you're going to process this word with the Lord and with community, but I'm going to share this because I'm trusting that you're going to judge this word. Yeah. And so not only honor, but it allows me to take a little bit more risk in what I feel like I'm hearing because I know it's not all on me as the giver, right? And so the receiver and the powerful and the giver, they're both very powerful in a prophetic exchange. And we like to call it like this. And I never can do this very well because I think it's more of a guy thing, but we call it the power to flush. Okay. You have the power to flush like a toilet, right? And so it's like if you receive a word that is outside of the character and nature of God, it's outside of scripture, it doesn't resonate, and it's not according to the rules of the game, which we're going to talk about pretty soon here, you have the power to flush it. Okay. You don't have to let it stick on you. You know, one of my friends was sharing a meeting years ago in Singapore, and this woman came up to him and it's like, "Oh, Pastor, I saw your shoes and it reminded me of this, and I just feel like you're running from fear." And there's just like, she started to prophesy this whole thing about fear. And I'm sure some of you on here have dealt with something like that, And so, but my friend who's mature and understood the power to flesh, he just said, "Oh, thank you so much. Like, I know that takes a lot of risk to talk to the speaker and prophesy. You don't have to be rude. It's like you get to be kind and loving because everybody on this practice and this journey of learning to grow in the prophetic is like, I just think so much. I really appreciate it, but I don't do fear, And so he kind of turned around and just kind of flushed that word. And so we don't have to get worked up about things that we absolutely know are outside of his nature, outside of his word, that don't resonate with us. And honestly, if you have received a word that you're concerned about, bring it into community, bring it to other people that you trust. Say, hey, I got this word. It's not resonating. I'm concerned about it. Can you judge this with me? If you feel like you need that help to kind of like flush that word. Now, sometimes we will get words that we don't maybe understand, or maybe, I got a little hair thing there. Sometimes we don't understand the word, or maybe they don't sound like encouraging or strengthening right off the bat, but they're not outside of his character and nature. So maybe we put those on the shelf. I love this example. I just shared this last night, but there is that prophetic word that Chuck Pierce gave about a plague-like invasion that would test us through Passover. Did you guys hear about that word?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So he gave that word back in January. So if I had heard that word in January before everything, I would have been like, that's not a very happy word there. Like, I'm just going to put that on the shelf. But man, when we were in the middle of it, I was like holding on to that word, because you're like, oh my gosh, God, you spoke. This is encouraging. Yeah. Like now we can like hold on to this word, that there's an expiration date to this virus or whatever. And so just learning how to process the words is actually a very important key as well as a prophetic community. So the receiver is as powerful as the giver. I just feel like that is just going to free people up right now.
Yeah,
for whatever reason, in prophetic exchanges, people seem to think that the person giving the word is like the be all end all. And it's like, and I get that there is a power when God's speaking, but we have to realize that the same spirit that is in them giving us the word is the same spirit that's in me to judge the word.
Exactly.
And so even as people are building prophetic communities, I feel like this alone and just the first and foundation, is going to absolutely free people up to take risks, to be an atmosphere of safety as people are stepping out in their own prophetic journey. And so those are the first two. And then the third thing is that a prophetic community embraces and expresses prophetic diversity.
Yes.
And so 1 Peter 4:10 says that each one should use whatever gift he has received to serve others, faithfully administering God's grace in its various forms. Okay. So we all prophesy in various forms. I mentioned earlier how we're all hardwired to see or hear or feel or perceive God. I believe we can actually access God in all the receptors, but many of us, we all have kind of defaults. Some of us are stronger seers, some of us are stronger hearers. And so already you can see the variety that's in a person's ability to receive the information that God's giving them. And then we all have different gifts. We have different ways to serve others. Now, I believe everyone can prophesy, but there are different gifts, like word of wisdom, hospitality, word of revelation. And so learning how to honor what other people carry or bring to the table, realizing that we all see in part, we all know in part, we all prophesy in part, that we don't have the whole picture. This is where that honor comes in, even to the family of God, because we value what the family of God can bring. God's voice is the sound of many waters. It's not just like one stream.
One trickle. Yeah.
Voice is the sound of many waters. And so all of us carry a different sound. All of us carry a different frequency or a different stream. And together we fill up that voice of God, the voice of the Father. There was years ago, a friend of mine he was a leader at a service, and a seer kind of came up to him. Now, when I say a seer, this was someone who actually can see in the natural realm. He could see spiritually what's happening in the natural realm. So he saw angels, he can see, the demonic, he can see things in the spirit realm with his natural eyes. So he came up to my friend who was like leading the meeting and just kind of whispered him during worship. He's like, hey, my friend was actually like, okay, I feel like God is doing something, but I don't know what it is yet. So he asked his seer friend, he's like, hey, what do you see? And his friend said, I see an angel holding a plate of eyeballs. Now my friend has wisdom. Okay. He's not going to get up and be like, the seer says the angel is here with a plate of eyeballs. That would freak people out. They would have no idea what was going on. But my friend in his wisdom realized, oh, God's going after eye miracles today. And so he stood up and he's like, okay, God is going after eye miracles, and we're going to start releasing. There's a, just releasing that in the atmosphere. And I think there was something like 14 eye miracles that day or something like that. So what's the point of that? Like, we embrace prophetic diversity. It shows honor. It shows that we understand that we don't know the whole picture, and that we learn how to work and value what other people have to bring to the table. My friend wasn't the seer. He didn't see the plate of eyeballs, but he knew what to do with the plate of eyeballs. He had the word of wisdom. And so that's part of being that body. It's actually, to me, it creates really a healthy culture of even humility as well, because humility and honor, because you're like, this is my piece. This is what I have to bring. But what do you see? What do you hear? How do you feel like this fits into the big picture? And so it's a beautiful expression of honor when you can really validate the diversity of the different ways that people hear God, as well as the ways that they deliver what they see. And so those are kind of the 3 prophetic foundations that we use at our church, that we use at our trainings. And those are kind of like what we lay down everywhere we go. Now, we have something else then within our prophetic trainings. We do a lot of activations because we really want people to grow in their ability to not only hear God, but also to activate that. And so we have set up also what we call a prophetic protocol, or I like to call them the rules of the game, actually. So, I'm part of a really powerful, like, prophetic community. Like, my church is awesome. I love my prophetic church. It's so good. And what does that even look like? Well, I like to use this example where you guys, I don't know if you guys are familiar with Sean Bowles. I'm sure you're familiar with Sean. He's awesome, just powerful in words of knowledge and just such a real guy. It's been fun to watch him on his journey. But he was at our church probably like 8 months ago. And, he was doing his thing where he's standing up there, he's calling out people, he's calling out names and addresses and social security numbers and anniversary dates. You kind of like feel that energy in the room. I don't know if you guys have ever been in the room when he's done this, but you're like, you feel that energy. You're like, is it my number he's going to call? Like, am I like the lucky lottery winner today? Is it going to be me? You know what I mean? And you kind of feel that, like, even though I feel content with the words I've received, and you kind of just feel that, And I remember the last time that he was here, I was like, I felt that for a half a second. And then I was like, you know what? I'm okay if I don't hear something from Sean, because I know I can go to like 1 of 10 people directly in my area, because every single one of them is powerful in the prophetic, and I can pull on them for an encouraging word from God if I needed to. So it was just kind of a cool awareness, like, wow, I don't need to have that affirmation, because I know where I can pull from that. And so we really believe like God is shifting in this culture, that God is transitioning this prophetic era from prophetic celebrities to prophetic communities. And it's not that there's anything wrong with prophetic celebrities, these pioneers, these fathers in the faith. I mean, that's my exposure to the prophetic, is where these fathers and mothers would travel. They would just kind of be like these circuit rider prophets, and they would travel. And I'm so grateful for them, because they kept the flame alive when very few people were doing it back then. It's almost like I see that picture of the Olympics, where they're those runners carrying the torch of the prophetic until it was time to light it up, and everyone is operating in the prophetic. And so I really value what prophetic pioneers and fathers have carried. But I want to encourage you guys that, with Sean Bowles and Bob Jones and all these amazing prophets, it's like the whole point of them was not to make us think that it's them, it's something special. It was to show what's possible in the prophetic for all of us. They're actually demonstrating to make us hungry for what is available to all of us in the prophetic. And so this is what God is really transitioning to, we believe, into this prophetic communities, because God needs the full voice of his bride speaking his will on earth to advance his kingdom. It's not just the 1 or 2. He needs every single son and daughter, Surely the Lord does nothing unless he reveals it to his servants, the prophets. That's found in Amos 3. And why is that? Because the prophets are declaring what God is saying, and heaven needs earth's agreement. And so this is why he's poured out his spirit, so that we can have this relationship with him, this dialogue with him regularly. But to prophesy is to release his will on earth. And so this is the transition that we're seeing. This is why everyone who you're on here right now, whether you're seasoned or whether you're new, you're still hungry for it, because God has so much more that he wants to reveal because of what we're stepping into. The harvest is coming. I mean, I'm sure we all feel that, especially in this time that we're in right now. We're starting to feel the shift and then the change. And so really realizing that prophecy is more than just a ministry skill. It is a life skill that God wants to speak to us about our businesses. He's speaking to us about our families. He's speaking to us about the education and the media, and agriculture and weather patterns. There's everything. There's nothing on this earth that God does not want to speak to us about. And so this is why we're hungry for the prophetic right now, because of what God is pouring out on a new level. So, rules of the game. Let me just share this really quick, and then we can maybe answer some questions. I hope you guys are doing okay. I know I'm talking a lot. If you guys need to interject or add anything, I'm happy to do that as well. Okay, so the prophetic protocol in a healthy prophetic community, we have what's called the rules of the game. And so my oldest daughter plays soccer, and she is a really good soccer player. I love watching her. She's 16 now, but I just remember there were times when I would watch her and she would get the ball and she just runs like a gazelle down that field. And I see her leg go back and she kicks a goal in, and I'm like, yes. But then the whistle blows. Okay. And if you know anything about soccer, if there's any soccer moms on here, if the whistle blows, that usually means that it was offsides, that it was actually, she had received the ball illegally. So the play doesn't count, even though it looked like she made a goal. All right. And so it's the same with the prophetic. Okay. If you're prophesying from the wrong spirit or outside of the nature and character of Christ, though the word could technically be true, it is illegal because it's not according to the rules of the game. All right. I'm going to just say that again because I know that's a mouthful, but let me say it like this. If you're prophesying from the wrong spirit or outside of the character and nature of God, though the word could technically be true, it's illegal because it's not according to prophetic protocol or the rules of the game. And what is that? What are the rules of the game? What is that prophetic protocol? Well, the first one is this, is that every word must be encouraging, strengthening, or comforting according to 1 Corinthians 14:3. Okay. This is New Testament protocol for prophecy. Every word must be encouraging, strengthening, or comforting. And, I'm actually really still shocked by this because there's times when we've traveled and I remember being in England recently and our pastor friend was telling us how a woman in his church received a prophetic word about how her marriage failed because of her and because of, choices she had made and all these things that were just so wrong. No wonder, people are feeling abused by the prophetic. Well, what is that? Maybe it was true. Like maybe those choices she made was wrong. Maybe someone was discerning something. But the point is, you don't use prophecy to address those issues. Okay. We're not saying that you can't see stuff. Okay. As people, as spiritual beings, we can discern junk in people's lives. We can discern challenges in people's lives. Absolutely. But we believe that you're supposed to use the written word and relationship to deal with those things. Okay. Not prophecy. So the written word, 2 Timothy 3:16-17 says, all scripture is God-breathed and is useful for teaching, rebuking, correcting, and training in righteousness. Okay. So we use the word of God and we use relationship with people to address those things in our lives. We do not use prophecy to do that. Okay. Because that would be an illegal use of prophecy. All right. So every word must be encouraging, strengthening, or comforting. Okay. And we like to say it like this: when you're giving a prophetic word, or maybe you're feeling something for someone and you're not sure if the word is like encouraging, strengthening, or comforting, we say it like this: you take your hand and you put it on your head and you give yourself the word. And if you don't like it, then you don't give it to anyone else. All right. I know that's a really simple and fun way, but it's true. Like, oh, I just have this word. Well, wait a minute. Let me do the check. Let me do the test first. Am I encouraged? Am I strengthened? Am I comforted by this word? Oh, maybe I'll sit on this a little bit longer. And so that's a simple test to really know. But every word in prophecy must be encouraging, strengthening, or comforting. That's the first rule of the game. The second rule of the game is that we ask that you be responsible with directional words, okay? Don't give anyone a word that you would not be willing to walk through with them. And, there's many communities that believe that prophecy is for confirmation only. And we don't necessarily believe that as far as like directional, people are afraid to give directional words. So we don't limit prophecy as much as we teach people to test and judge prophecy. All right. So, but if you're giving somebody words about moving or, anything big like that, you got to make sure that you're available to walk through those words. And so you need to be responsible for those words. I have a friend who's a prophet who actually prophesied to another friend about their son that he was going to marry someone whose name was, I think, Grace or something. Okay, first of all, I know we don't usually do the mates, dates and babies and all that kind of stuff. And so this is just a good example. He was a prophet and he did say, you need to judge this. So this friend of mine wouldn't date any women who didn't have that name, right? And so his mother was getting frustrated, because he was older. He was in his 30s. She wants grandbabies. And so she was frustrated. She's like, this is not working. So she went to my friend, the prophet, and she was like, hey, you gave him this word and now he's refusing to date anyone. Like she held him accountable for that word. He had to be responsible for this word. And so my friend was like, you know what? I mean, I understand what you're saying. I really felt that impression, but you guys absolutely judge this word. And if it doesn't resonate, that's okay. And so, they were just kind of walking it through. And then within a short time after that, this man had met somebody and he was kind of dating her, and her name wasn't Grace. But eventually he was like, hey, what's your middle name? And her middle name was Grace. And so it was like my friend, the prophet, was right. But, he had the wrong, order or whatever. But what's the point? The point in that is that we need to be responsible with directional words. And understand this is that love only shares what a person can bear. All right? Love only shares what a person can bear. Jesus said that. Jesus told his disciples, he says, I have many things to reveal to you, but you're not ready to hear them yet. And so when we give prophetic words, we need to realize that sometimes people are ready to hear that full picture. And we need to just kind of be responsible for that. There was a supernatural student last year in a part of the country and back east. And, she got excited because she had led like a homeless man or brought a homeless man into their supernatural meeting. And so they brought him up to the front and there people were prophesying, and she prophesied this huge word over him. Like, you're going to write books and you're going to change nations and you're going to, just this huge word. It was so big, and it was probably true. I mean, it was true. The word was resonating. It was a powerful word. But if you looked at this man's face, he's like, I don't even know what I'm going to eat in the next 15 minutes, let alone how am I going to write books? How am I going to change the world? And that kind of a thing. So realizing like you probably saw correctly, but if you can see 10, 20 years out, you can certainly see 10 months out, you can see 1 year out. You can see what are those next steps towards someone, to help encourage and strengthening and comforting. I don't know that big of a word was encouraging to that person in that particular time because he was already so overwhelmed. And so just really learning to dialogue with the Holy Spirit, you will see things that maybe you're supposed to hold on to. Okay. In fact, the more you get into the prophetic, the more you're going to start hearing God speak about all kinds of things and learning that really love is patient. Love is kind. Did you know that 1 Corinthians 13, that whole passage is actually that everyone uses for weddings, which is appropriate. It's about love, but it's actually in the context of spiritual gifts. So when you hear that, you got to change the language. In fact, Dan McCollum actually wrote a book called Love and Prophecy about this, and he went through each chapter where he's like, prophecy is patient. Prophecy is kind. Prophecy is not self-seeking. Okay. Understanding that whole chapter is really about spiritual gifts given in love. So you're going to be seeing, you're going to be hearing, you're going to be getting so much information from the Lord. And I get it, because before, when you were like just learning how, you're like, I got something, that means I have to say it. You like suddenly feel this pressure, like, where's my opportunity? I'm in the church. I need to stand up. I need the mic, pastor, And eventually you realize, you're like, it's not necessarily, there are protocols, there are protocols on where to share, on when to share, on how to share, on who to share to. Graham Cook, he's a prophet. I'm sure you guys, many of you have heard of him. God told him that he wasn't allowed to release any prophetic words for a year. He had to hold on to these prophetic words for at least a year before he was allowed to deliver them. And what is that? God was teaching him how prophecy is patient, and so really understanding that as we're responsible with these words, recognizing that love can only share what a person can bear, and so that particular man in that situation, what would that have looked like? She was seeing correctly, but probably prophecy being patient in love in that particular circumstance, develop a relationship with the person, help him find his next meal, help him get on his feet, help him understand things. And then, hey, I saw this for you before, and I just want to share this with you right now, in a time where maybe he could receive it better. To me, it's almost like turning on a fire hose to someone who's so starving, who's thirsty, it's like they can't drink anything yet because they don't have capacity. And I'm saying that to also say, on the flip side, sometimes you will see things over people that will feel big to them, but it's to help them be prepared. Like, I've received words about speaking in stadiums and speaking to these large audiences. And, first of all, I could never make that happen on my own. There's no way I could ever make speaking in a stadium happen by myself unless I went into an empty stadium and there's no one there. And maybe I spoke. But I could never make that happen, right? I mean, knowing my personality, I'm like, I'm spoke at a stadium. No. So what is that? Okay. So when I received words like that, I know, okay, how do I prepare? How do I align myself with who God says I am? Because this is so much bigger than I even see myself. And it will be. Can I just encourage you guys? Like, God always sees us better than we see ourselves. God always sees us higher than we see ourselves. And he speaks that over you because he's looking for your agreement. Because when you start to agree and believe who God says you are, then you will start to live out of that reality. And so this is why prophecy is so vital to really your life, because when you start to see who God says you are, you're going to start becoming who God says you are on the earth. You're going to be the world changer God says you are. And so I would get these words about stadiums. And so I would start to prepare myself. I'm like, how do I align myself with this word? Okay, I'm going to start studying how to speak better in public. I'm going to start researching how to connect, not just communicate. I'm going to start following people that I feel like are powerful speakers. I'm going to start kind of aligning myself with other people and being around people who are good speakers. And I'm going to say yes to every opportunity I get. Doesn't matter how big or how small, whether it's in front of 2 people, I'm going to say yes to that because I realize I am in training. I am in preparation to become who God says I am. And actually this year I'm supposed to speak in Brazil at a stadium event for a women's event, the largest women's event in Brazil. It was actually scheduled in April, but everything had to be postponed from the COVID thing. But I was invited to speak with like John and Lisa Bevere are going to be speaking there, and Havilah Cunnington, and my book's going to be the feature book there. And it's like, okay, I could never make that happen, but I'm celebrating it because this was something God promised, and I feel ready. I feel confident. I could speak in front of 10,000 people and I could speak in front of 10 people. Like, it really won't faze me because I know who I am as a speaker and I know who I am as a daughter. and I prepared myself. And so sometimes those kind of bigger words, I know I'm a little bunny trailing, but I feel like it fits in here. It helps us to prepare. And so I don't want you to be afraid to give big words to people, but make sure you are willing to be responsible for them.
I want to share with you really quick, Bethany, just to like encourage you. You're not really bunny trailing, but so when the higher view was birthed, and my coach pulled me aside, and she's like, "You need to ask, Papa, what the core values are going to, be for this group and for the women," and it gave me this acronym IPIE, IPIE, little I, which starts with the identity and humility. That's why it's the little I, right? But at the core of our being is P, the prophetic, and I, intercession. So hearing the Lord, pressing in and having that conversation with him on behalf of, let's say, that prophetic word, right? Which is the servant piece. And then the E, the empowerment, which is you're empowered to either walk it out yourself or deliver it, or, in your call, in your design. And so everything that you're saying, for me personally, is so affirming
I'm so glad
values that he gave for this entire group.
Wow.
And you didn't know that, and I had no idea what you were going to say. We haven't been connected before. So no, you're not bunny trailing at all. You are literally speaking directly to this group and these women in such an amazing way. So
thank you. So good. Woohoo. Yay, God.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I think that's powerful. I can tell you guys are all powerful. I mean, I can't see everyone on here yet, but I'm trying to I want to see some of the comments as well, but hopefully you guys are keeping track of that. I'll go back and read through them. But yeah, so just really recognizing that part of the rule of the game is to be responsible. So love only shares what a person can bear. Okay. But you also have to be responsible. Don't be afraid to give those big words, So if it's someone you have a relationship with, or honestly, when we have our trainings and activations, and maybe you're giving prophetic words over total strangers, we were not going to limit that, but I will say, hey, why don't you give them your email address so they can contact you if they have any questions, and that's okay. Giving a word. Okay. Let me just say this too. I feel like this is important. It's like giving a false word, or not a bad prophecy, does not make you, or a wrong, let me say it this way. Giving a wrong prophecy does not make you a false prophet. Okay. A lot of people get concerned about that. They put this pressure on themselves that they have to prophesy perfectly, and that can actually restrict them as well. And it's important to realize that giving a wrong word does not make you a false prophet. Having a wrong motive is what makes you a false prophet. Okay. In the Bible, in fact, you can even be a prophet and give a wrong word. Okay. Let me give you a couple examples. There's two in scripture that we see, but Agabus in the book of Acts, he prophesied to Paul, and he said something like, they're going to come and they're going to wrap your arms, and, you're going to wrap you in rope, and they're going to take you away to Jerusalem. The soldiers will come. Well, they called him a prophet. I don't know if I have all the details right, but they called him a prophet, but he actually had his details incorrect, because they actually took him to Rome, not Jerusalem. So, but the Bible never called him a false prophet. So he had the right word. He just had some of his details incorrect, which is why we judge the word. Okay. Now, a false prophet is someone who has the wrong motive, or the wrong intention. Maybe it would have to do with money, or manipulation, or control. And so an example of that would be actually Balaam, in the Old Testament, who was invited by the king to bring a curse on Israel. And remember, he couldn't do that. This is the story of Balaam with the donkey. And what's interesting, the Bible calls him a false prophet, but he actually is, I believe, one of the only ones who actually prophesied. I think he's the only one who prophesied that Jesus would be born in Bethlehem. And so he actually had some right words, but the Bible called him a false prophet because he had a wrong heart. He had a wrong motive. And so for people on here who are concerned about giving wrong words, can I just say, if you're doing it to reveal the love of the Father, which I'm going to get into, that's going to be the third point here. It's then you've accomplished your goal, because really prophecy at the end of the day is a tool for love. Prophecy at the end of the day is a tool to release and reveal the love of the Father on the earth to someone. And so when you are releasing prophecy and your heart is to love on them, through that word, whether the word is true or not. Okay. Whether it doesn't come to pass or whatever, don't discount yourself. Keep practicing. This is why we create healthy communities. We create kind of opportunities for people to practice. But I'll just kind of segue into that third rule of the game, which is to be clear and be kind. So when you give prophetic words, to be clear and be kind. How the word is delivered is actually part of the word. Okay. How the word is delivered is part of the word. In human communication, they've done studies where actually only 8% of the actual words spoken is received by the hearer. And then about 47% is tone of voice. And then the remainder is body language. So it's so interesting because just knowing that it's actually the way we communicate is as important as the word itself. In Proverbs 27:14, it's kind of funny because it says, if anyone loudly blesses their neighbor early in the morning, it will be taken as a curse. Right? I love that you're like, woo, woo. What is that? It's like, my intention is to bless, but if I'm yelling, loudly, it's like, I don't care what you're saying to me right now. The way your body language, your tone of voice is coming at me, I don't want to hear it. Okay. So the way the word is delivered is actually part of the word. And so when we prophesy, our words, our tone of voice, our body language should absolutely be aligned with the Father's heart and what it is he's wanting to release. If you were wanting to release, let's say, like you felt like God was releasing a spirit of joy on someone. And so you feel like, God, I just feel like, you're praying over a person that, that season of mourning is over, joy's coming in the morning, and so you're prophesying over someone. But if you sound like, if you're sounding like Eeyore when you're giving this word on joy, like, okay, joy is coming. You know what I mean? Like, I know it's kind of silly and I don't do it well, but the point is like, it won't be received. Like, I don't want that kind of joy. If that's joy, I don't want that kind of joy, And so you got to make sure that you're actually embodying this word. You're hearing from God for someone. You want to embody his heart, the heart behind the word, as well as the word itself. If you're releasing a word of boldness and courage, make sure you sound like you're filled with courage and you're filled with boldness. And God says this over you and you're going to take the land, And so there's ways that we can receive. If you're releasing a word, gentleness, remember all the fruits of the Spirit. Those are ways that the Holy Spirit communicates. This is the Father's heart. And so make sure that we're identifying with the word. And when we give the word, that the person can actually receive the heart behind the word as well. And so those are just some of our rules of the game on how we train people up and we create environments where people can take risks, so every word must be encouraging, strengthening, or comforting, according to 1 Corinthians 14:3, that to be responsible with our words and also to be clear and to be kind, along with the prophetic foundations. Those are just some great starting places for people to start building healthy prophetic communities, as well as activating the prophetic in a safe way in their own life. And so those are just some of the few things that we do every time we start a training session before we go into the different trainings and activations and biblical basis for hearing and seeing and feeling and perceiving, all the ways we're already hearing God. Yeah. Woo.
That is so awesome. So we have a few minutes left. We have one question from Audrey Frable that, and mind you, you will have to go in on the comments, Bethany. There are tons of comments.
Okay.
Tons of comments rolling.
Great.
So the question is, Audrey Frable wants to know your favorite book on communication. So how to communicate your, prophetic word and whatnot.
Okay. And well, specifically within the prophecy or just in communication? Because those are kind of two different things.
Yeah. She didn't specify to grow as communicators.
Yeah.
So.
There's so many out there. I will say one that really struck me was John Maxwell's book called Everyone Communicates, Not Everyone Connects. And I just thought that was really powerful, realizing that everyone can communicate, but actually the power comes in your ability to connect with your audience, connect with people. And so that was really helpful for me. A lot of times when I do travel and I speak in other countries and languages, every time I come up, I realize nobody knows me. So I have to do something to connect with them in some ways. And so whether it's one of my favorite things actually that I like to do is when I'm in another country, I like to kind of say a few words in their language, in Portuguese or in French or something like that. Sometimes even I've done this in England before where I'll try to speak in like an English accent, and it's so funny because I'll totally butcher it because my daughters are so good at English accents. So I'll be like, okay, I'm going to try to speak like you guys right now. And I'll try to speak an English accent. And I sounded like, do you want a shrimp on the Barbie, in England, and everyone's laughing at me, which is great because if they're laughing, that's a way to connect with you as well. And so I have no problems laughing at myself, but, yes, Everyone Communicates, Not Everyone Connects by John Maxwell was a really helpful book for me just in learning how to communicate a lot, just in a way that's effective. Yeah.
Yeah. So Nancy Akins, when is your next school? So before we run out of time, and I'll post it in the group, but for those that are chomping at the bit, because I know there's a bunch of them, why don't you let them know the website, the name of your book, where they can find you, and if you have the date yet on the next school.
Yeah. So our website, propheticcompany.com, actually lists all of our events. We do have several events coming up the second half of the year, starting in June, hopefully, as everything is start lighting up. We're supposed to have our School of Prophetic Trainers in a couple weeks, but we're going to have to reschedule it because our county is not lifting the shelter until the day after. So we're going to be rescheduling that. I know it's so sad.
Yeah.
But we're still having it this year. So we have several events. You can find those on the upcoming events on propheticcompany.com. Those are our live events. We also have been doing a lot of online Zoom training events in the season. We actually just finished one it's called Finders on Saturday, which is all about utilizing the prophetic insight and words of knowledge to help find missing things, missing persons. And so just realizing that God has a heart for the lost. And so that was a really fun training. So if you follow propheticcompany.com, also our Facebook Lives, Prophetic Company. We also have a website called activateprophecy.com, which lists all of our online e-courses. We're still developing more, but if you want to even grow just practically in the prophetic, we have activations. We have great biblical teachings and trainings. So you could find that on activateprophecy.com. And then I'm actually going to I did write this book called Own Your Assignment. I've seen some comments that some people have read it. That's awesome. And let me just talk briefly about that. And just that, there are so many amazing books out there about what a father carries and the unique assignment of a father, but there has been very little out there about what a kingdom mother, the spiritual mother carries. And I would get these prophetic words, like you're a pioneer and you're a forerunner and a trailblazer. And I'd be like, yes, that's me. It's amazing. And then they'd be like, and you'll be known as a mother. And I would like cringe inside because in my mind, not because I don't love being a mother. I have 3 children. I love my children, but this was not about my natural children. For me, this was about being a spiritual mother and realizing like, wow, I kept getting these words that I had an issue with. And I realized like either God, you need to stop giving me those words because you're wrong, or I need to find out what you're actually saying. I need to press in. And so the Lord really opened up just some scriptures to me and really showed me like how powerful of an assignment that a mother actually carries that is uniquely and distinctly different than what a father carries. And realizing that actually one of the first kind of keys of being a mother is that in order to raise a world changer, you have to be a world changer yourself, and learning how to model for others what's possible, so influencing others through our example. And so I wrote this book and Chris Valentin prophesied over me. He said, you're going to write the book that's going to redefine what motherhood is in the kingdom. And I really believe this is a prophetic call for women to step into something that we've either misunderstood or has been misdefined, so that because of what's about to shift in the harvest, we're going to have all these orphans coming into this harvest, becoming sons and daughters, but they won't know how to live as sons and daughters. And they're going to need fathers and mothers to actually show them how to live that way. And fathers are amazing. And I talk about the synergy that we work with fathers. I mean, I've had spiritual fathers in my life and I love, but there is a distinction between the two calls. Fathers are really the identifiers, but mothers are the activators. Mothers are kind of the missing piece in the kingdom family of God. And so this is a call for women to really rise up and step into that. And so my book is already out on Amazon, but I have a audiobook that I'm releasing. It's going to be out soon, nice. But I'm also going to be I kind of wanted to get this done so I can offer this to you guys because there will be a limited seating. I'm doing this Own Your Assignment 5-day challenge. It's going to start after Mother's Day. So any woman that's a spiritual mother, that's a natural mother, that's a single woman that maybe is an influencer, really every woman qualifies for this. It has nothing to do with actually having biological children. Has to do with the assignment that a mother carries. And so that we all can grow into. We're actually supposed to mature into this. We're not supposed to remain just daughters forever. You know what I mean? To one another in our relationships. And so I'm doing this Own Your Assignment 5-day challenge for those who are interested. And it includes either the ebook or the audiobook. You get to choose. And so I wanted to make that available for you guys first before I start promoting it. This week.
Oh my gosh.
What?
I am so excited about this. You have no idea. Literally something that happened this morning. And it was funny because before this interview, everything's been crazy. And I'm like, I haven't even gone to her site to look at anything yet. So I literally knew nothing. But we have on the site a mentorship program. And I've been like, Papa, what is it that you're wanting to do with this mentor program? Because everything he's been doing new and he's been doing different.
Yeah.
And so we had stuck that mentorship program in there, but we weren't doing anything with it. And I'm like, Lord, I know we're supposed to do something, but what is it that you're wanting to do? And so this morning, he totally birthed this, that we're going to switch this mentorship program as a mothering. So we're going to match up mothers and daughters to, to create that relationship. It's about building his family. And so I'm like,
I'm getting God bumps. That's so cool.
Stoked. And I'm like, so Pam Pertiller, Anita McGee are heading that up. And I'm like, oh my gosh, we have to launch this with your challenge. And your book. I mean, that is I'm so excited right now. So absolutely amazing. I love how he brings all these pieces together.
Totally. Okay. And I have to tell you on my end, this is kind of funny too. So I knew Mother's Day was coming up, and obviously that's a good push for me because this book is about mothering. I mean, it's about kingdom mothering. And I'm always cautious with it because I don't want people to think this is like a parenting book, because it's not a parenting book. It's actually about the assignment of mother. So I was like, okay, Lord, how do I do this? I feel like I'm supposed to do this challenge, but realistically, it's a lot of work putting this stuff together. And I'm doing so much other stuff already. Everyone's chilling during this shelter in place. I'm not chilling. There's a lot going on. But what's so funny is you guys reached out to me. I spoke at a women's thing last night. I have another podcast this week. 2 women. It's like, oh, you're just trying to make it easy on me, God. He made me get this ready because I knew I was speaking to these groups. And so I really do feel like God's in this. He's definitely calling women up to that governmental family role, that just to understand, because honestly, the earth needs it. The earth needs the mothers. The earth needs the mothers in the family, in the kingdom of God, and it's been the missing piece.
Yeah. Yeah. Bethany, I want to honor your time. We do have questions. Do you have time for questions, or?
Yeah, I can answer maybe another 5 to 10 minutes. Yeah.
Okay. So we have, how do you reset your heart when the prophecy is beautiful and powerful, but it scares the crap out of you? How do you deal with the fear?
No, that's awesome. I mean, I think we need to come into that place because like I mentioned earlier, that God always has higher thoughts about us. He always sees us better and higher than we see ourselves. And so I really believe that a big part of our process on earth is just starting to think like God thinks about us, believing who God says we are. I think that's our biggest struggle in identity is is obviously unlearning things, but more than anything, it's believing who God says we are. When Gideon was, was hiding, threshing wheat in the wine press, and the angel of the Lord appeared to him. Do you guys remember this story? The angel of the Lord shows up and says, "Oh, Gideon, mighty man of valor," and what's funny about that was Gideon wasn't being very mighty in that moment, and he had never fought a battle, he had never led an army, but heaven came down and said, "This is who you are." In fact, his name actually means destroyer one. So and even in his name was a prophetic declaration of who he was called to be and what he was called to do. And so heaven was just coming down to remind Gideon of who he was so he could step into what he was called to do. And so a lot of times when we're struggling with those kinds of things, we just need to, it's a great invitation to dialogue with the Father, with the Holy Spirit about like, God, you're seeing me like this. Help me to start seeing myself the way you see me. Heaven said that Gideon was a warrior before he ever fought a battle. And that's okay to be overwhelmed with the way God sees you. But that doesn't mean that we don't need to grow into that. Okay. So Gideon had to come to this place where he agreed with the word. Okay. So when we get these words that just feel too big, when we're getting these identity words that are just like, I don't see myself, the first place is we come into agreement with that word. We say, okay, I agree, Lord, this is not about me thinking this way. I mean, false humility is actually saying that it's not thinking too highly of yourself. Okay. It's thinking of yourself less than God does. Okay. So actually true humility is thinking of yourself the way God thinks about you. That's true humility. All right. And so we want to step into that place of actually agreeing with who God says we are. Okay. And then that second place, what we want to do is we want to align ourselves. Okay. What do I need to do internally to become who God says I am? There might be some things you need to let go of. There might be some things you need to cut off. There might even be some relationships, some healing, or maybe there's just some things that you need to grow in, but whatever happens, you need to start aligning yourself with those words. Even that word about being a mother. Okay. I would get these prophetic words about being a mother even after I wrote the book, and I was like, okay, I have to agree. It's like I had trouble agreeing with it because I had a misconception about what it was defined as. And so I had to step into a place of aligning myself with who God says a mother is so that I could step into agreement with that. And then that final step is that appropriation. So we agree, we align, and then we appropriate, which means we start to step out and walk out in who God says we are. Every time I step on a stage to speak somewhere and I feel unqualified to be there, every time I'm in a room that I don't feel like I'm supposed to be there, I remind myself, okay, I'm a pioneer, I'm a forerunner, I'm a mother, I'm a Deborah, we actually talk about this, an I am statement. We create what is called the heavenly identity statement from our prophetic words. That's something we do with our prophetic processing, which is another course and a training and a teaching. But when you identify and you write out who God says you are, you just start to repeat it to yourself. And it's not being prideful. It's actually honoring who God says you are so you can be who God says he wants you to be. And so I would just encourage you to agree, align, appropriate. But what he says is true, and so there might be some lies that you just need to, break off, but you can start stepping into who God's called you to be. His word doesn't change. We're the ones that just need to change. We're the ones that need to grow into who he says we are. And so Gideon had to take that first step to become a warrior. He had to tear down his father's altars, remember, that night. But he says he did it at night. God told him, tear down your father's altars. So he did it, but he did it at night because he was afraid. But he still did it. So he took baby steps towards becoming that mighty man of valor that God said he was called to be. And so we take baby steps towards who God says. We remind ourselves, we keep that vision in front of us so that we can actually walk that out.
I love it. So we have a ton of questions. So, Julie, I'm going to let you go through the feed afterwards and help some of these ladies on their questions. But I want to honor Julie and Karen as our panelists. Do you guys have a question for Bethany before she's got to run?
I don't have a question, just a comment. That was so clear. And my strategic brain just loved the way you laid that out for us. And I'm so grateful for your time today. And we've been stepping into this. And I was looking for a book in these 6 boxes. And so I said to my husband, which one is it in? And he was like, let me pray. And he actually found the box, and the book was the one right on top. And you were talking briefly about finding things and relying God more. And it seems like silly things when you don't understand, but it's like he just loves these little moments with us. And so it's just like the little things, but these big things. And so thank you for that. I took a ton of notes. So if anybody needs the notes, just let me know.
Oh, that's awesome. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Yeah, no, this was amazing. So confirming. So just what, I was really sensing for this group, kind of the foundation, laying the foundation. I know we're going to have you back. I know these women are going to they're going to access your resources. You're going to be hearing from them. This is a hungry group. And so what you just did, Bethany, thank you. This is amazing. I mean, the comments are like, yes, like this is something I wish I would have learned way back when I was stepping into the prophetic. So I wouldn't have gone through the pain and the heartache. So yeah, thank you. Bless you. Amazing. Yeah.
I can feel the hunger. It's totally pulling it out of me too. I'm just like, this is great.
Yeah. So next time we'll do some activation with the group and that, woo, yeah.
Well, thank you so much for your time, Bethany. And we will be stewarding these seeds. I promise you have put them in really good ground, and we are so going to be stewarding them. And I just pray and bless you that your harvest is going to absolutely overtake you. I cannot wait to see what your challenge produces. And just believing with Papa that it is over and beyond what you can dream or think, as he promises. I just really feel like it is. It's just such a amazing corporate word for what he's doing in this season right now with raising up women. And like you said, we can't raise up a bunch of orphans. We have to raise up the mothers and the daughters, and the grandmothers, and go out in power. And that's what's going to bring together such an amazing generation. And I just want to thank you for being at the forefront and honoring us with your time and your seeds. So
thank you so much. It's such a pleasure being with you guys. I can tell you're a powerful group of women on this page. So it's just an honor to be with you guys. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Yeah, and we'll be posting the challenge and stuff for the women, right?
Yep. Yeah, we will. We're going to put all the links in there.
Starts the day after Mother's Day, so it'll be those 5 days. I think just in the morning, that week. So yeah,
awesome. All right,
guys. Thank you. Bye, guys.
Bye.